Welcome once again to Live, Lead, Legacy, the podcast where we dive deep into leadership, impact, and the legacy we leave behind. I'm your host, Carlos Luna, and whether you're leading a team, driving change in your community, or even better, guiding your family to greatness, this is your space. Today, I'm joined by a guest who embodies leadership and is a powerhouse in organizational leadership and risk strategy. But before we dive in, if you find value in these conversations, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our YouTube page. Your support helps us to reach more leaders like you, continuing to grow this incredible community of impact-driven individuals. This is Live, Lead, Legacy, where life and leadership intersect. I'm thrilled to sit down with a dear friend that has taught me so much about leadership, Mr. Michael Simmons. Mike is the Senior Vice President of Human Resources, Risk Management, and Legal at WKS Restaurant Group, one of the largest franchisee organizations in the U.S. With a career spanning across human capital strategy, safety, and legal oversight, he's not just shaping workplace culture, he's protecting brand value from the inside out. A former university faculty member, a dual master's degree holder, and a certified risk management expert, Mike brings a unique blend of academic insight and real-world execution. He's also a graduate of the Elite Chief Human Resources Officer program at Wharton Business School. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Mike Simmons. Hey, Mike, welcome to the Live, Lead, Legacy podcast.
Thanks, Carlos. Appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Well, it's my pleasure. I've been looking forward to our conversation for a really long time. For our audience who may not know us, you and I have known each other for a number of years. We've actually been co-presenters at a number of trade events and have even had the occasional sparring session with one another on the differing points of view, rather, in our industry. And of course, it goes without saying that I value not only your friendship, but certainly have a deep level of respect for you as a leader in our industry. You know, I generally like to hear about what forms an individual's worldview, right, and how it's shaped. And I'm wondering if you would be so kind as to just share with us a little bit about your childhood growing up. What were your experiences like as a kid? And maybe that'll give us a peek behind the curtain into, you know, why you believe what you believe and how you approach things the way that you do.
I grew up in I guess you could call it a poor family. I grew up in a primarily Latino community in Baldwin Park, California. Grew up in Baldwin Park in the 70s, at a time when that area was probably considered to be a pretty tough environment, both for Latinos as well as, you know, people like me. Probably changed schools about every 7 or 8 months. In fact, I think I went to the entire Baldwin Park Unified School District at some time in, you know, from kindergarten through ninth grade. So we moved around quite a bit. I think that stability or that kind of ability for my family to be flexible, I think was something that kind of started the foundation of resiliency, I think, that I demonstrated in my career. I really had a little bit of a tough time as a kid in that, you know, in the schools I went to that were primarily Latino, you really weren't accepted out of hand. You had to actually prove that you were, you know, accepting of others for who they were. And it was something that my mom taught me at a very early age, that, you know, everybody is everybody and you should accept everybody for their strengths or weaknesses, for their faults. And I kind of melded in with that community, and I've actually stayed in touch with many of the people that I grew up with. I mean, I have a friend that I've known since I was 12 years old, and we're still friends to this day. I kind of decided at a really early age that, albeit things were going on around me that were a little untoward. I mean, I grew up in a biker family, for anybody who understands what motorcycle clubs are about. And and it was an outlaw biker club, so that was even more of an interesting thing for a kid growing up in that environment.
Sure.
And I learned really early on that I wasn't going to make the same mistakes that a lot of the people around me did. And ultimately, a lot of the people around me did make those mistakes, went to prison or passed away or something unfortunate. And I just decided I was going to try to rise above it. And from about the age of 14 on, I was committed to it, and I never really looked back.
It's amazing, Mike. What a story. So you talk about how, you moved around quite a bit in your younger years. Do you see that as a maybe one of those experiences that actually helped you to embrace, change, or maybe helped you embrace that things may be different tomorrow? Or did it, in your mind, did it make you feel like you were more cautious about things, holding on to things, trying to prevent change? How do you feel that that experience impacted you as an adult?
I absolutely love the experience of change. I have no hesitancy to make change if I think change is necessary. There are times I'll make change that doesn't really need a qualification, doesn't have to be qualified in order to do it. I'll use my instincts, I'll use my intuition, I'll use my experience. I'll even use my childhood as a barometer about whether or not a change is necessary. And I trust my instincts. I always have. I think I think change is something that we as a probably as an industry are lacking. I think as a result of that, it has a tendency to influence our ability to innovate and our ability to scale. And it's probably one of the things that I'm least excited about in our industry, that people are not looking at innovation and looking at change as a real motivator. I think anybody who's in this business, who's been in it as long as I have, I'm going end of this month will be 39 years, that we should be looking now for our exit, for our exit strategy from this business, and we should be looking to leave a mark and leave a legacy. And then if you're not willing to innovate, I don't think that happens. And I think a lot of that comes from that resiliency that built up with all the movement when I was a kid.
You're absolutely right. I think that, one of the biggest challenges that we have as an industry in recruiting new talent is the lack of innovation, the lack of embracing change, the lack of looking for new ways to do things better. We tend to be very comfortable in the status quo. We tend to be very comfortable in, feeling good that we know how to do things because it's the way we've done it for so long. But it's not a great campaign, right? When you're out trying to recruit these young kids who really do embrace change. They really do embrace a faster lifestyle, right? As proven through the proliferation of technology.
Nothing drives me crazier than hear someone say, "Well, that's the way we've always done it."
Yeah.
If you say that to me, I will find every single way to get around that obstacle.
So you see it as a personal challenge, right? I
Oh
love
yeah,
it.
if you say that to me, you've laid down the gauntlet.
Yeah, yeah. So if you were to look back at young Mike, right, and he were to meet Mike today, well, what do you think would surprise young Mike most about you?
Well, okay, so you're asking me if young Mike met the current Mike, how that young Mike would feel about what I've become. I would hope that he'd be proud. He'd be proud of the fact that he committed to something at the age of 14, and this Mike made sure that it went through to fruition and that he achieved the things in his life that he was dreaming about when he was a kid. I mean, I live a dream. I'm a blessed man. I have pretty much everything I could possibly want in life. I mean, I got a great family. I got a great profession, a great job with a family that I care deeply about, that I get the opportunity to work for every day. So I think that young Mike would go, okay, so it worked out, 95% the way that I had hoped it would work out. And if old Mike was looking at young Mike, he would think that young Mike is an idiot.
As most of our older selves would, right? Of our younger selves. It's like, yeah, I think back of when I was a kid and I just, face and palm a lot of times. It's like, man,
Yeah.
this kid did not know a thing. So I'm glad to hear you say that. And I would echo what you're saying. I think that if you do work hard in this industry, if you um, do what you say you're going to do, if you treat others with respect and kindness, I think that you will build a career that you can be proud of, and you will build a career that you can look on, with great gratification, right? Feeling fulfilled in what you're doing. I certainly do. So I appreciate you saying that. As
But
the
let's be on the record about it. I appreciate the observation about treating people nicely and treating people in a certain way that will help you engage. But I have to admit that it's not really necessarily my reputation in that I think people they know what to expect when they're working with me. I think they know that I respect their abilities as a professional. I respect their abilities as a human being, but I'm not always the most sociable individual. I'm not the most, I don't know, my social skill sets are probably a little Neanderthal compared to others, but I'm very time specific. I think time is a commodity. I like to try to eliminate a lot of the niceties about an engagement, unfortunately, and I think that people find that to be aloof or even arrogant. It's not by design, it's not intentional. It's just, something had to give when, over the last 39 years, and I think the thing that gave for me was the social niceties part of it.
Well, that's an interesting observation, Mike. What I'm hearing you say is that over time, you've learned that being efficient with your time, at least to you, is more valuable than the niceties. And I use that word intentionally because you use it. Niceties almost has like a veneer connotation to me anyway. And I would say that in our industry, there definitely is a lot of patting on the back, a lot of socializing that happens that is not genuine. And I think that individuals like yourself probably have experienced that many, many times, as have I, right? As many people have in our industry. But you've been comfortable saying, you know what, let's not pretend, right? We're here to work, we're here to get business done. Let's get down to business. What do we need to talk about, right? As opposed to going through this facade or maybe this fake exercise of pretending to really love and cherish one another. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, I think what you're hearing is that um, I think people are, they're generally good. I think that there's really this significant skill that it takes to really perform at a high rate of performance in this industry. And I think that there are a lot of really good people in this business. And but then I think there are others that probably mask it and probably are just trying to get through it. I love what I do. I'm passionate about it. I don't want to put it on par with law enforcement, but I think the things that we do, while they may not necessarily save a life, they definitely improve quality of life for people. And so I take that very seriously. I'm not I'm not into the accolades. I don't need I don't need a slap on the back. At the end of the day, I don't do what I do alone. I do it with a team. And
Yeah.
I've surrounded myself with some really knowledgeable people who, if I don't know something, they sure will. And I'm not looking for, my name on a golf tournament or anything like that. That's just not, or I understand people are putting their names on pickleball tournaments now, which I, it's completely confusing. It's a confusing thing to me. But I just want to come to work and I want to leave a legacy when I'm gone in probably 10 years, which means that for those people out there who may not necessarily care for me, yes, 10 more years. I really want people to work hard in this business, and I want to get down to it.
So let me ask you a question as it pertains to your role at WKS as a vice president, senior vice president of HR, risk, and legal, right? You clearly have a complex role, in my opinion, that requires you to wear multiple hats. So when you're leading across these various departments and divisions, Mike, being legal, risk, and HR. How do you lead these various areas of the business while keeping a unified vision? Um, from your perspective, how do you do it successfully and try and keep that cohesiveness across the organization when you're dealing with the different departments?
Well, I mean, I'm a big believer in structure, and I'm a big believer in developing the people that work with me. I'm totally transparent. I don't leave anything, to chance. I don't hide anything from the people that work with me. I will tell you that if you took a poll of people who know me, they would say, I always know what I'm going to get with Mike. And there's a reason for that because that transparency, it breeds trust. And it makes the people around me understand that because I'm not keeping anything close to the vest, because I'm putting it out there, that I'm not threatened by them or their skills or anything like that. And in fact, I invite them and challenge them to want my job. And if I can develop them into coming to get this job, then I've I've done exactly what I should be doing as a leader.
Mm.
And what I love about it is that the more that you invest in people, the more that you develop them, the more that you demonstrate a sincere desire to help them be better and to become leaders in this business in their own right, the more they will work for you, the harder they will work with you, the more creative they get, the more committed to the mission they get. Then my job as a leader is to simply drop in the structure. Just drop in the structure, drop in the guidance, be that strategic leader that they require for a very tactical job that they may be doing, and go to work. And it just seems to work in my scheme.
It's the difference between having a manager mentality and having a leader mentality, right? A leader is self confident. They are aware of their strengths and are not intimidated by the strengths of others. They invite others to be the best around them, understanding that in doing so, right, if we're all our best, then the team really is operating at a very high level. I love that perspective. So I want you to put on your SVP of legal hat for just a moment here, and I want you to talk about it in your operation, how you balance legal compliance with building a culture within your organization that feels empowering to humans. I mean, you're in, the food retail business, right? So customer service is a big aspect of what you do. How do you balance the two? Or, and I know you'll be super honest and transparent with us. Are these two concepts indefinitely at odds with one another where it has to be one or the other? It can't be both, right? It's either you have to be really dogmatic about legal compliance, or you've got to be a little flexible in that department so that you can create a culture that feels empowering to your employees. What is your opinion on that?
Actually, I think that if a leader believes that compliance and dealing with the human element in our business is mutually exclusive, I think they've done themselves a serious misjustice. I think that they are not only hand in hand, they are absolutely joined at the hip. I think that the more transparent you are with your workforce, the more that you educate them, the more that you let them know how much a part they are of the success of the organization. And compliance is one of those elements that is an absolute success criteria. You might actually be surprised at the amount of people who want to share in that success in the company. We have people all the time. We didn't used to, but we have people all the time who talk in our operations group talk about compliance. I mean, the company cared about it so much that we developed a job description for a compliance specialist, and that's all that this person does.
Hmm.
And the person that does it is actually one of the most engaging, empowering individuals I've ever worked with. She's just her name is Evelyn Gisano, and she's just awesome. And I think you can not only should they be, joined at the hip, I think that you should create policy and procedure and structure around the idea that there isn't any kind of I don't know, probably any kind of a big canyon between the two functions. I think that they should be joined.
That's great insight, Mike. I've always considered, as far as you're concerned, one of the biggest strengths that you possess as a professional. There are a lot of strengths that you possess as a human being, but as a member of our industry, one of the things that I think you is really valuable with you is just the deep knowledge base that you have. You're very passionate about learning, and I love that about you. You and I share that in common. I love to learn. From your perspective, right, and just the experience and the steep knowledge base that I'm talking about, is there an emerging risk or opportunity that you feel the restaurant industry should pay more attention to in 2025 or beyond? Is there something that you think, we've really got to spend more time in this area because it's really going to hit us in the face? We're not going to be fully prepared. Anything on your mind as it pertains to that?
Well, I think it caught restaurants off guard last year when California implemented the $20 minimum wage with less than 5 months to make that corner. I mean, fortunately, WKS was able to weather the storm and weather it well. But in fact, we even used it as a competitive advantage. But the problem is that it isn't over. This is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this. We're going to see more regulatory changes. We're going to see law changes by, both in the court system as well as in the like House of Representatives and Congress. And we're going to see all of this eventually float into the states, and we're going to be impacted. And for anybody who has a multi-unit operation in multiple states, it's going to be whiplash. We're going to be constantly looking around trying to figure out what's coming at us next. And I think a good risk professional, and I think you have to really have some legal knowledge too, but a good risk professional is already looking at what that's going to
Mm,
be in 5 years, what that's going to be like in 10 years. As I mentioned when we first started the discussion, I think that is going to require innovation. It's going to require the ability to turn a battleship around in a bathtub, and to do so in a very short period of time. And if you can't make that turn, you're going to lose traction. And while other companies are gaining a competitive advantage over you for not having been able to look around that corner, I think that's probably the biggest threat. Will be that there's just so many changes coming, and if we're not utilizing all of the tools necessary to identify what they are now, work on mitigation strategies, and get them implemented, yeah, it'll be like driving on the 405 today, where
mm.
nobody's done absolutely anything with for some reason.
That's great insight, Mike. So I know you've mentioned it a couple of times already, and I see that you're a major proponent for innovation and finding ways to be more efficient, better informed, right? Of course, there's the emergence of AI over the last number of years. And I think we would be dishonest if we didn't say that it's a polarizing topic, right? Particularly in our industry. The supporters, people that support AI, love it, love its ability to expedite, basic business practices like document creation, QA. Um, but then you have your camps that really are widely concerned, right, with security, with privacy, with the warehousing of this information and these types of engines, AI engines. From your vantage point, risk management, how are AI and automation changing these areas that you oversee, HR, risk, and legal processes in the restaurant space?
Well, any risk professional will tell you that whenever there is a new or emerging technology or any form of any potential risk, the first thing you do is you go into a risk assessment of that. And then you try to determine whether or not the benefits outweigh the risk. It's all risk benefit analysis. I think that the risk industry is grappling with that right now. I think it's probably trying to figure out where AI and other new and emerging technologies are going to fit in. I think AI is just the beginning of a technological revolution that the country is getting ready to go through. I think AI is going to become something completely different in a few years. I think it's going to become so embedded and so integrated in pretty much everything that we're doing that it's just going to become as, popular as a, laptop computer has been. I don't think there's a threat as long as the threat is managed. I think if you do an assessment on it, I think if you put mitigation strategies in place, I think anything is manageable. And then it comes down to risk tolerance. I think we're so far behind now as it relates to our lack of innovation. I think that there are a lot of risk managers like myself who are hungry for this. Now, I have to admit, I'm 61 years old. Most people would think, okay, guy's in his 60s, is going to be retired in the next 5 or 10 years. Why does he care? Well, because I think I can make up in the next 10 years for the lack of the innovation that we've experienced over the last 30 years. And I think that my company, I think that risk professionals in general, I think that we can really make a difference with this. And so I embraced it from the get-go. And I'm surrounding myself with both my internal and my external partners that have a similar mindset. We're gonna keep all the rules in place, and we're gonna make sure that we're monitoring, for any kind of a potential threat to include data security, what have you. But we'll do everything we can to mitigate those risks, but that's not going to stop us from moving forward.
So a small subset of the risk carve out, if you will, of course, is workers' comp, right? And workers' comp, many have described it as a very people-centric industry. Of course, naturally, you have at the center of the equation, you have the injured worker, right? And you have the employer. In your opinion, how is AI going to successfully add value or efficiency to an industry that requires a lot of one-on-one interaction or engagement in order to prevent litigation or in order to prevent, a non-catastrophic injury from having a catastrophic outcome, meaning the claim never closes. People just get sicker and sicker as a result. So in your opinion, how will AI help bring value into an industry like that?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you think about what managing claims is, it is and has always been, even with technology, a paper pushing exercise. It's always been volumes and volumes and volumes of documentation that the examiner at the desks are required to understand and intimately understand. And there is supposed to be this automatic comprehension of whatever's occurring out there. And unfortunately, because we're not doing a great job of innovating, we're also not doing a great job of developing these talents that are sitting at those desks. And I think AI is going to bridge that gap. I think AI is going to make it over time so much easier to manage the day-to-day operation of claims management. I think it's going to take it from almost a purely tactical exercise to a truly strategic effort where we develop these people to look at claims over the long term. One of the things that I think AI, or it really scared some people in our industry right up front, was when people started using it by dumping their loss experience into this engine, not really fully understanding how to prompt it and how to manage it, how to effectively utilize it as a tool. And they started getting responses back that really concerned them. I remember early on when this first started, there was this exercise of dumping in your data, and you'd look at it and you didn't manage it well with a prompt, and suddenly it would come back and tell you, hey, this case is reserved at $10,000. It's worth 150,000. You should just pay 150,000 a day. Well, I'm an ex-examiner. There's nothing more offensive to my instincts than to tell me that that engine knows more about what that claim is going to be in 5 years than I do. And I think it was a threat. And it's going to be refined over time. I think it's gonna really help us with the mundane activities of the day to day, and
Hmm.
it's going to allow examiners, supervisors, claims managers, VPs. I think it's going to allow everybody within that structure to be much more strategic and much more thoughtful. And I think if we deploy that thought, it can only better us as far as our reserve management and reducing exposure to claims overall.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is that the most valuable application of these type of technological innovations have to be coupled with competent human oversight and management, right? And really to make sure that you get the full value out of it is what I'm hearing you say, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying.
No, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who thinks that they call it artificial intelligence for a reason. There's never going to be a replacement for the real human side of this. AI is not instinctive. Now, it can mimic your tone, they can mimic your voice, it can mimic images. There's all kinds of cool things it can do, but it cannot mimic your intuition.
Hmm.
It's a strictly humanity driven concept. And so AI is never going to be able to do that. So human beings are always going to be involved in the process, which means AI is always going to be prone to flaws and failure. So it's going to just become part of the human experience. I don't think it's going to replace the human experience.
WKS, in my opinion, Mike, and it definitely set me on track here if I'm off, but WKS, I would say, is probably a mid-sized organization, certainly a larger franchise company within our space, right? There aren't many that are as large as WKS, but in the global world of finance, I still consider WKS to be a smaller-ish company, right? That probably faces a lot of similar challenges. And the smaller organizations, of course, when you have resources and you're able to pivot to respond to regulatory and statutory changes like the minimum wage requirements, right? It becomes a little bit easier to manage your operation. But I would say in the big scheme of things, WKS is probably still on the smaller side. If you had a magic wand, right, and you could have anything for a day, King Michael Simmons here, what obstacles would you remove to benefit small businesses throughout the country? I know you have strong opinions about this, and I really wanted to make sure that I fit this in to our interview. What, in your opinion, is stifling small business in the country today that you would do away with?
Say regulatory oversight. I would say greed on the part of the legal system. I think unfortunately the tort reform is probably a thing of the past. I don't really think that I don't hear people talk about tort reform much anymore. I think California is ripe for both regulatory and tort reform. But I don't see either one of those things happening anytime soon. I think that unfortunately the last 5 or 6 years, I think COVID had something to do with it. Small businesses have been lumped in with large businesses as it relates to the devil. And as a result, all businesses should be penalized and all businesses should pay, a substantial amount of this and that and taxes and what have you. And I think everybody's kind of, well, not everybody, but a lot of people out there have lost sight of the fact that small businesses drive this country. Always have, always will. And that's a business model that's not going to change. And if you stifle that early on, if you stuff regulatory concerns down the throat of a small business person and you make it so untenable and so unappetizing to want to grow and to scale up and to be a huge a contributor to the tax base, I think those are problems. I'm not sure that I'm not sure our industry or just restaurant industry in general could make that change on their own. Of course, we employ some of the best lobbyists in the country and in the world. We do have a voice, and I think the more that we exercise that voice, the better for the industry as a whole. I don't know if I would characterize WKS as small. We were small. We are a family-owned business that started in 1987. Our owner and founder, he bought one El Pollo Loco restaurant, and that was his first concept. We have since then grown to 400 restaurants. We make up four different brands, El Pollo Loco still being one of them. El Pollo Loco, Wendy's, Krispy Kreme, and Denny's. We are Denny's, Krispy Kreme's, and El Pollo Loco's largest franchisee. And there are only 8 other franchise organizations in the country that are bigger than we are. But we still believe in the family-owned business behaviors. It's all part of the values that we demonstrate as a company. I will tell you that if you asked our owner So how do you like being in the restaurant business? He would tell you he's not in the restaurant business. He would tell you he's in the people business. He tells that to everybody who will have a conversation with him about it. He understands how important people are to us. So I think that we've lost sight of the fact that we are a people business. Not necessarily. I don't think WKS has lost sight. I think our regulators have. I think our lawyers have, and I think they come at businesses forgetting about the fact that you can hurt human beings here. And fortunately, because those people exist, I have a job.
There's always that benefit, right? Job security, as long as this human behavior continues. So I want to come back to the conversation of innovation and, an area in the insurance industry that has long been a topic of discussion that really needs some interruption, some innovation, is the conference model, right? That you and I have been a part of for years and years. There have been, subject matter experts out there that have criticized the existing model. Of course, we've seen dwindling sponsorship dollars going towards the larger conferences out there. We've seen dwindling attendance, and the value overall, I think, has definitely been impacted as well as a result of, the model just being so antiquated and just so outdated, in my opinion. I know you have some strong opinions about the education piece of insurance. Tell us about how you would innovate the conference model or the education model within our space.
I've gone to plenty of conferences, like you mentioned when we first started, that you and I have actually attended some conferences together and had our chance to work together that way. I think if you go to a conference today, the conferences are stuck in the quagmire of the present. I just don't. I don't know how many conferences I've gone to where it seems to be a simple regurgitation of everything that everybody else is saying. They just threw in a couple of extra words and try to make it their own. I don't think that solves problems, and I'm really disappointed with the quality of the education conferences are going on out there in our business. I think that even though AI is coming at us, at this exponential rate, we're not stopping to say, okay, maybe we should start asking different questions in these conferences and in these education sessions. Maybe we should start talking about how we look 10 years out, 20 years out, 30 years out, because there's plenty of new people coming into this business every day. And it should be incumbent upon people like myself and others who are coming to the sunset of our careers to I think we have a duty to try to pass on, that information, but then ask and compel that next generation to take the next step. Let's start talking about innovation, not in slip resistant footwear, or not just in floor machines for slip and falls, or not just in the latest technology for a back device. No, we should be looking at how do we best look at the defense industry as well. How do we innovate in what our defense lawyers and our defense system does? How do we make those changes? I'll give an example. It was probably about 10 or 15 years, 15 years ago. I was so fed up with the work comp system. I was so fed up with the way that my work comp defense lawyers always said to me, Mike, we can't win. We will always lose. And therefore, we just have to go with it. And I just don't accept that. I reject that notion entirely. And so I just decided maybe I didn't want to work with work comp lawyers anymore. So I had a couple of general liability defense lawyers that I've worked with that were very aggressive and didn't think they could lose any case, that they would take a case all the way to trial if necessary. And I turned them into work comp defense lawyers. And I remember the first year we did it, we had 4 take nothings in California work comp, which is nearly unheard of. That was an innovation. And I got to tell you, I just don't think everybody looks at a technology to innovate. They don't look at a process. They don't look at a procedure. They don't look at a law. They don't look at those things to change. I think all of that could be innovated. And I have an opportunity in May, and I'm trying not to do a plug, but I have an opportunity in May. We're spending a day with some industry professionals at a day-long session where we're going to talk about what innovation in this business really needs to look like. And I'm hoping that I'm gonna see a lot of like-minded individuals in our business coming together and saying, it is time that we started talking about what it should look like in the future. Talking about the past and talking about the present, it's really not going to lead to anything. So anyway, I took a long way around about that, but I really do think that those are our biggest threats, and I'm just disappointed that we haven't had more of a discussion about it.
I like your approach on innovation not being necessarily technology driven, but more so think of different ways that we can do our processes better.
Yeah, if you talk to a tech person and you mention innovation, they're going to tell you what the new technology in phones looks like. But innovation is it's a much bigger concept, a much bigger word than just limited to a technology innovation. I mean, we have to change the way we think. That's innovation. And there's 100 concepts of things that we should probably look to change in this business if we're gonna be successful in the future.
It comes back, I think, with being okay with change. It comes back with being okay with, you know, thinking outside the box. There might be a better way for us to do this if we just look somewhere else, right? I love the example that you gave about uh, using general liability attorneys in place of work comp defense lawyers, right? Because you looked outside the box and you knew that the mousetrap that you were using was not working. I think that individuals in our industry should challenge themselves to look at things outside the box, right? And try and figure things out, try and figure out a better mousetrap, try and figure out how we can do things better and get the better outcomes that we need, both for, the injured worker as well as for the payer. Absolutely.
Well, you remember the old saying, if you're going to come to me with a problem, don't just come to me with a problem, come to me
Hmm.
with a solution, some proposition, some value proposition to it. And I think that's a step that we've stopped taking. We talk a lot about the problems, but we haven't said, okay, so what's the proposal? What do we need to do in order to change it? And I don't want to get caught in that quagmire. I think unfortunately that's where we are as an industry.
Mike, you have total liberty here to make a plug. You mentioned earlier you didn't want to do a plug. Now you have me curious about what you're talking about, this gathering of the minds in May. Tell us more about that.
I'm working with some other risk managers, and I'm working with a friend, and we're putting together a thing called Exalt Hospitality. And while I love the restaurant industry, I do think that there's a much bigger opportunity here to reach out to our colleagues in retail, food retail, hotels, casinos, convenience stores. I think that there's considerable buying power there. And I think if we were able to harness that as a combined industry, we would be a force to be reckoned with. And so we're trying to bring all of the knowledgeable, risk, HR, and legal professionals from those businesses and those industries into a single environment. And you can't come into it and talk about today. Right now it's invite only. Ultimately, I'm assuming it will grow and it'll expand. But right now we're targeting, people who are of this like mind, and that is come in and talk about the next thing or don't come. And that's what we're doing now. It's called Exalt. It's EXALT. It's going to be held May 22nd at Diversified Restaurant Group in Vegas. It's a full day event. I know myself and Sean Jackson with Panda and a few others have put out, some LinkedIn messages about it. But I think that anybody who's interested in the future of this industry should probably reach out to myself or Sean, and we'll make sure that they get signed up. But yeah, I get to do the first session. I get to do it with a friend of mine, Zach Cooperman, who is pretty much leading producer in the restaurant space for Hub International. And we're going to talk about AI and prompt building and how, how you can take these simple steps to maximizing your exposure to the C-suite and how you can get recognized and be acknowledged for being that forward thinking, futuristic individual in your business. I'm looking forward to that presentation. I know that there's three or four others that are going to be of benefit as well, but I don't want to plug them because then, somebody might want to go to theirs instead of mine.
I love it. I love it. No, it sounds like a great, great event, Mike. We look forward to hearing more about it. I want to do just a quick rapid fire, just a few questions for you, okay? Because I love to pick your brain on certain things. Some of these are fun, some of them are insightful. But from a leadership perspective, Mike, what's one leadership mantra or quote that you personally live by?
There are so many from like so many of the leadership books, but I don't really use so much a catchy phrase. I just think about the word resilience. I think that, and I talk to the people who work with me and the people who work around me, and I talk about how we have to be resilient and how we have to be committed and how that focus is what will help you deal with the stresses of everyday life, not just what we do at work, but what we do at home. I push resilience. I push development. I think that those are key factors in becoming something better than you are today. And I will tell you that's probably the most fun I have in this job is just watching other people grow. And so that's probably it.
It's a true leader, man. Watching other people grow and feeling good about it. So, if legal, HR, and risk were characters in a movie, what roles would they play? Would they be the hero? Would they be the villain? Would they be the damsel in distress? What character would they play in a movie?
Well, I think Risk would definitely be the hero. I think HR would likely be like the mad scientist because I
Okay.
think that HR has so many moving parts to it. I have to admit, I just got involved in exclusively HR in the last 4 years, and I've learned so much. And the beauty of it is I learned so much from the people who I work with who have been in these industries for 15, 17 years. Um, but yeah, so I think HR would be the mad scientist. I think legal might be the anti-hero in
Oh,
that I,
okay.
I think because legal it has to have a dark side. There's no way out of that. Legal has the two sides vying for, superiority, and there's always this confrontational element of it. So I think it would be the anti-hero. But yeah, risk definitely the hero, and HR definitely the mad scientist.
Well, you got very creative on that one. I love it. I love it. So, is there a book or a podcast or a leader that has had a big influence on you and how you operate? Besides myself, of course, I know I'm a major influence on you and your leadership style. But is there another leader or another podcast that you would say, man, that guy never misses? He's got some great insight that I always lean into.
So I can't say that there's a podcast because I'm not a big podcast viewer. It's even though I'm talking about innovation, it's not necessarily the way that I really pull information. I'm in that way I do go back into history, and so my favorite character in history is Abraham Lincoln, in that I can't think of any figure in history that probably went through more adversity and achieved so much in the face of truly going up against a very, very aggressive rival community that was so dead set against the changes he wanted to make. And he was a change maker. And I liken, my feeling about change to to his changes. Of course, mine are nowhere near as monumental and important to America as he was. But there is a book called A Team of Rivals by Goodwin. And I've read that book 3 times. And my wife and I were like total history buffs. We love history. And every time I read it, I pick up something new. I pick up something, that I might be able to use in my work life and my daily life. I do the best I can now to bring what would normally be considered an enemy closer. I I don't know if I'm always going to be able to get over the hump with certain people, but it doesn't mean that we both can't have the same mission, just maybe with a different way of approaching it. And that's exactly what Lincoln did. It's how he was so successful. He brought his enemies close and he made them allies. And I love the prospect of doing that with people who don't necessarily agree with me and I don't agree with them.
I've come to know you, Mike, over the years as someone who certainly is very generous, with your time. I've seen you volunteer, give your time to a lot of different educational organizations to be an educator, be a speaker, be a moderator or a coordinator, right? Someone who coordinates these events with them to make sure that the rest of us in the industry get some quality mentoring out of it. When you think about, you know, the day that you finally say, you know what, I'm going to clock out. You mentioned earlier that's 10 years away, right? If you were looking into the future, what do you want your legacy to be like? What do you want Mr. Michael Simmons to be remembered for?
Getting things done. I mean, there's a lot of talk in our business. There's a lot of theoretical. There's a lot of would love to have, would love to do, would love to get done. And then there's people who get things done. And I'm hoping that when people look back and they'll say, you know, Mike could be a little gruff, Mike could be a little grumpy, but at the end of the day, he was committed to the mission and he made our industry better. And if that happens, I'll be pretty happy with it.
Get stuff done. Get ish done, as the young kids say. And then the last question that I have for you today, Mike, there certainly are a lot of people out there, a lot of young leaders out there that want to eventually get to a position of fulfillment in their career, to a place that they can sit back and be grateful for, like yourself. What advice would you give them to help them along their journey to achieving those goals, just like you have?
Well, I mean, I think I've learned firsthand that when you're goal oriented, goal driven, and you're willing to run the gauntlet in order to get things achieved, you can you can step on a few toes and step on some delicate sensibilities along the way. And I think that if that's going to be the way you're going to approach it, then you have to spend the years that I think I committed and spent to it to try to at least do it in a way that at the end of the day that's not an unpleasant experience dealing with you. I've said this for many years. I use self-deprecating humor, and a lot of people who have ever talked to me have heard me like I'm totally willing to be real about my own failings. And I think as long as you remain human, that you don't come across like a robot, and you're not this strictly this practical individual that has no room for humanity in their lives. I think you're probably going to do a lot better than I did early on. And it was a lesson it took me a while to learn. I'm hoping that the younger generation will learn it much quicker than I did.
Well, we appreciate your honesty, your genuine remarks, and your transparency today, Mike. We really appreciate it. Thanks again for joining us on the podcast.
Carlos, I appreciate the opportunity to come on. Thank you.
Absolutely. To our audience, you can connect with Mr. Michael Simmons on LinkedIn by clicking on the links in the description section of the podcast. We sincerely appreciate you joining us today on the Live, Lead, Legacy podcast, where we explore the stories, strategies, and successes that inspire leaders to leave a lasting legacy. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who could use a little inspiration on their leadership journey. Please be sure to show your support to the channel by visiting and purchasing an item from our store. Your small gesture will go a long, long way. For more insights, resources, and updates, follow us on all of your major social media outlets like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next time, remember, live with intention, lead with impact, and build a legacy that matters.